Hey there, internet friends. Welcome to another episode of That Nerdy Site Show, a weekly podcast where the team members from That Nerdy Site get together to talk about our lives and all of the nerdy things we love about them. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and joining me this week we have Logan Wilkinson. How you doing, Logan?
I'm doing wonderful.
Doing excellent, great. This is our second in a back-to-back
Doing
string
a
of
double
recordings.
header out here, yeah.
You and I just recorded our Patreon early access episode for end of February. End of September is what I almost said there. End of February / March.
Yeah.
It'll go live to everybody at the end of March. Talking about some games that either didn't click with us first time around, or just games in general that like really clicked on part two, or like on our second attempt. So if you are a Patreon support, you can go get access to that episode right now. If not, it'll go live for everybody at the end of the month. And yeah, it was a good, fun chat. But today we're going to be talking about a handful of other things, kind of more of our normal rigmarole of the show, the things we've been watching or playing recently. In particular, Logan, you have a couple things. You're going to be talking about Gone Home and Temptation Island. I have been. I sat down recently and played Return of the Obra Dinn for the very first time after hearing great things about it for the last couple of years. I also am almost wrapped up with my Mass Effect 2 replay in advance of the second replay I'm going to inevitably do in a few months' time when the Legendary Edition comes out. And then I also sat down with a pair of or a trio really of movies from the 90s in The Mummy and Austin Powers. What's the first one? The Spy Who Shagged Me, and Austin Powers International Man of Mystery, yeah. And the second one is The Spy Who Shagged Me. So I will have some more thoughts on those three things as well. But before we dive into that, a little bit of housekeeping. If you like what you hear, please remember to like, subscribe, rate, review the podcast everywhere you can. If you're feeling extra generous, you can always support us on Patreon at patreon.com/thatnerdysite, just like all of our wonderful Patreon producers have. Thank you to Pam Larson, Sherry Starkey, Teresa Wilkinson, and myself, Trevor Starkey. Helps cover the costs of our podcast feeds in particular, so we can kind of keep those coming out for everybody every month. So yeah, let us dive right on in. Logan, you sat down, and we talked about this one on the other episode as well. But you sat down and replayed Gone Home.
I did.
Poor Kay, and how was that experience?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, so I played Gone Home last weekend when we're recording this. I played it because Shrav wanted to play a video game, and I thought that would be a great choice for her. And also because Gone Home is great, and I like it. And so we sat down, did it on one playthrough. She had the controller in her hands for the first 25-30 minutes, and then I kind of took over for the last hour and whatever we played after that, after the game got spooky. And yeah, it was a blast. I think, like we kind of mentioned on the prior podcast we just recorded, I'm constantly impressed at just how clever and smart of a video game Gone Home is. I think it's going to be, 8 years old this year, Jesus. And it's still, I think, is so effective at what it aims to do. I think all the side stories are still so well told. I think that obviously the main stories remains very much excellent. And I think just the level of environmental storytelling, the level of just level design in general, and the mansion, kind of talked about again on the last podcast, there's so much thought put into every single detail of that video game. I think right from the very first area into the final spot in the attic, that I was still blown away all that time later just how good of a video game it was. Shrav loves it too. She had a great time. And yeah, it was a very, very good gaming experience over the weekend.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's I don't want the whole episode to be like we talked about on the other episode, but that's definitely a game that as you and I just discussed, didn't like. I enjoy that game, especially when I did get over the spookiness of it years later, and just sit down and play it. But in particular, so many of the topics and themes that it's really touching on, while significantly rarer in the video game space, especially 8 years ago, as you kind of mentioned. Um, like we're well-worn territory for me, especially like with a theater background and having spent, God, at the time, in 2016 when I eventually finally got around and played it, that would have been what, like, no, 2015 when I played it, I guess. Was it 2015, 2016? Whenever it was, it was like 10 years of theater that I had spent my life doing. So I had plenty of kind of exposure and interest in a lot of the LGBTQ stuff that gets kind of brought up in there. And so it didn't resonate with me as much, I think, as it does with so many other people. But it was definitely still like it's still like an important game and an interesting game in the, especially like seeing where narrative based games that are often derisively kind of called walking simulators and stuff have come since then. It was definitely one of the earlier ones to do it. And so like it definitely holds a special place because of that. But yeah, the emotional beats for me in that game just haven't really like stuck with me in the way it seems when people talk about this game that they've stuck with other people.
It's interesting playing it, I mean, obviously a week ago, and I haven't played it in 2013, then I haven't played it in between that, and like charting kind of evolution where how, for lack of a better word, normal the love story at the heart of the game feels in 2021, right? In 2013, certainly the industry at large in video games, I mean, I don't remember a single like same-sex love story before that in Gone Home. And certainly not one that I had played that I can recall. And even in like movies and TV shows, like it was still like, it was like the event episode of that season if there was like something like this happening. Or it would lead to a show getting canceled. Shout to Ellen. And so it was one for me where, and it did feel very much like, oh, this is like a thing. And fast forward 8 years, and it's like, this is like, and Trevor just like totally nonchalant, like, oh, like she's a lesbian, and she's just like, that's what the story's going to be, and it's also going to be spooky. And I was like, yes to one of them. And I just think that in itself is kind of like an interesting evolution, like you kind of alluded to, of like the game's importance in the industry and in storytelling in the industry. And also I think both the path it laid for similar games to take kind of that baton and run forward until even more kind of progressive and inclusive stories, and also the larger culture, right? Like that's the thing, is that the issue of like same-sex relationships and like LGBTQ rights in general have accelerated at such a rapid pace in American culture, right? Like when this game came out, Gone Home, it would have been a year after the President of the United States of America came out in favor of same-sex marriage. It only was 1 year after that, right? Like, it was still not legal to marry someone that you loved in large chunks of the country.
Yeah.
And Modern Family had been on the air for, like, 2 years, right? Like, as another, like, pop culture touch on, like, this is still pretty, like, new into the thing, right? And, like, it's really interesting for, I think, myself and Trevor, right, like our kind of generation, which I think really grew up as like this change kind of overnight, right? Like Trevor grew up, I mean, in like the middle of like the AIDS epidemic, right? And Reagan essentially doing nothing about it, right?
I mean,
like,
I don't know if I say I grew up, but yes, I was born in
right?
'85. Yeah. I was not aware of any Reagan, of that stuff until many years later.
Yeah, like Reagan like condemning the people, I'm like not caring at all, right? And then the 90s and like Ellen's TV show Big Reveal and all that kind of stuff, and then
I remember you and I talked about it to give like Quinn context back when we did West Wing in it of like the idea that like Will and Grace would come out after that and like really help normalize that in the same way that like Orange is the New Black a few years ago or Transparent have started to normalize transgender characters in pop culture.
That's a great point.
Like the importance of that, is often like harder to recognize, when we're years removed from it, and it's just kind of the norm. And so, realizing what a different place the industry was at, 8 years ago when Gone Home originally came out compared to now. And even in that like 3-year gap between like when it originally came out and when I finally played it, probably also plays a role as to like why it didn't resonate with me nearly as much as it resonated with people in 2013.
That's a great point. Yeah, it is I think a super important game in history for a lot of reasons. Also because of its role in, like you said, the walk and sim genre, which is a genre, ironically enough, that I really love. I really love walk and sims. As someone who, I would say like loves games for the ability to tell stories. And yeah, I think it was very refreshing to play the game yet again and just be like, man, this is just like a really neat game that I think does a lot of things very cleverly. So I did that. It was fun. It was fun to play it with Shrav as well, and kind of have her get hands on. Like I told Trev, it's such a weird thing to like. I mean, obviously we host podcasts about video games. We write about video games. We've been to conferences about video games. We're in the industry. We've done these things for 20 plus years. To like wrap your head around, like, all right, not everyone knows how to walk in a video game. Right? Like, not everyone played Super Mario 64 20 years ago and has it like, oh yeah, this is how you do it, right?
Yeah. So like, so many of those things, like, came to us in piecemeal form. So like, somebody jumping into a first-person shooter right now or something is a different challenge. It's interesting because I remember, and you, like you mentioning, like, introducing Shrav to this reminded me, especially because we were just talking about her in the last episode, when Kat was looking for something to play back when we got into playing games. I introduced her through Thomas Was Alone.
I've mentioned that one to her. Yes, that's a great point.
Like on that one, and especially because they just released, like now here in 2021, they just released like a new like DLC bit with a whole new, like a new character kind of thing that got added to it, which I think is cool. And it's not like, because they did this to like coincide with it coming to Switch. But that is like, you don't have to worry about like camera angles and stuff like that. It is really just, it boils it down to incredible simplicity in like, you're controlling this block and you need to jump. And you can like eventually switch between other blocks, and you like each of them has a different mechanic around them. But like that, like a platformer definitely seems to work better as like a introduction point, as opposed to something where like we grew up in an era before analog sticks. So like when analog sticks came in, like it was like, oh, okay, now like on the N64, okay, I move with this analog stick. And I change camera angles with the C buttons or whatever, and then eventually the DualShock would give us like 2 analog sticks, and obviously the 360, and that has become like the norm. But like that has been the norm for us for like 15 years or whatever, but is still like a very weird kind of thing to come into. If you don't have that understanding, which is another reason that, like, I'm sure mobile games, are so much more like successful. A casual audience, and people play mobile stuff is they don't have to dive into the more complicated notions of that. Which I mean, and even on like, as much as I deride them, like that's so much of really still Nintendo's philosophy and mentality is like, you can play most games on a Switch with a single Joy-Con. It's just like the one button for or the one stick to move around, and then like the A and B buttons or whatever. And that's like they've almost designed those things for that like simplified control scheme, especially like the first party Nintendo stuff, to really like keep people like feeling like they can understand what they're doing, even if it's their first time picking up a controller, which, I get like shout out to Nintendo for that, but also like make better games, or whatever. But yeah, so I appreciate that. And in particular, Thomas Was Alone would be, I think, another interesting one. I
love Thomas Was Alone
to introduce Shrav to.
Mario is one that I've mentioned before too. Like it's obviously like Mario World 1 Level 1 is just like
Well, very cool. I'm glad she enjoyed. I'm glad that was like something you guys could kind of do and enjoy together. Um, yeah, yay for Gone Home being like
Gone Home,
an
absolutely.
introduction to video games. Um, so I will throw it over. I'll come to me. Like I said at the top, I uh, have heard great things about Return of the Obra Dinn for years, but never really looked too deeply into it to know even like what kind of game it was. I had seen like the visual art style of it, which, if you're not familiar, is very much like, I mean, even in the settings, it's like described as like a Macintosh, is like
Yeah.
the visual setting, and it's basically like, old school computer graphics, where it's like two tone, a black and white kind of visual style, um, uh, and like, yeah, it's really hard to like describe even what that is to people, but it's basically like the game, the premise of the game. Like I first out the gate, like love this game. It especially after doing our detective mission in Hitman and Dartmoor. Like you are basically playing detective and you're trying to figure out what happened on this ship. You are like an insurance adjuster effectively for the East India Company, who tragedy has struck the Obra Dinn, and you're there to try and like figure out what happened to pay out the claims or whatever for the East India Company. So and you have two like weird artifacts that you pick up at the beginning of the game. One is a watch, and the other is basically your journal. The watch lets you like relive the moment before somebody's death, basically. So you'll go around the ship and you'll find like a skeleton on the ship, and you like trigger the watch for it, and you'll hear a bit of dialogue. Like you'll hear some people kind of talking back and forth usually, or you'll hear like the ambient whatever was leading up to the moment, and then it will cut to like the scene, like a still image of the scene that you can walk around, you can interact with, and you can like zoom in on characters, and the companion piece is the journal that you have, which has like a couple drawings that kind of show the entire like crew of the ship, um, and like you have kind of the ship manifest, and basically like you go around through these scenes, and it'll be like the one of the first ones you'll see is like a guy shooting another person, somebody else behind that other character, and then if you like really kind of like walk around the ship, like you'll usually be confined to like a block of the ship that you can explore, but you might be able to like walk away from like this very dynamic image that you're seeing, and if you like climb up, you'll see another guy kind of like walking away, and and you basically have to be like, okay, what is happening in the scene? As the scene will end and it'll cut to the journal, it'll be like, okay, here's the picture of this person who was like the focal point of that scene. You have to determine who he was and how he died, and like obviously you can see, like you go in and you select how he died. Oh, he clearly got shot. Okay, by who? Who is the attacker? And you know who the attacker is, but you don't necessarily know who he is yet. And so you have to kind of like piece through together in across many more scenes. And usually like one scene will open up into another couple scenes, that will fill in the blanks. It'll kind of like piece together, and you'll see like other people die in the sequence and stuff. And it's just a really fascinating approach to like this kind of almost environmental storytelling slash like piecing together. Like one of the last scenes I ended up seeing was like, oh, okay, now I know who that is, so now I can connect the dots and go all the way back to like one of these early mysteries I was piecing together, and say, okay, I knew that this person died because of this. Now I can, now I know who shot them or whatever it was. So it's really cool, and just a very like innovative approach to kind of a mystery slash puzzle game. I had a great time with it, and then it definitely dives into like the weird fantastical, like like a kraken shows up at one point and is like just like tearing people limb from limb, and that's like one of the, the ways people died. It's like torn apart by monster or something like that. And it's like, okay, well, yep, some of those people definitely wreak havoc, and yeah, so it's just a really really interesting game, and I had a great time with it. It like really really cool to explore. I think it's something you, especially following kind of our Dartmoor escapades, you might really get a kick out of or really enjoy.
How long would you say the game is?
I'm like, so my first playthrough of it was about 4 hours to see all the scenes,
great.
but I only like there were 60 people on the ship, and this is another thing. Like the game will, like when you piece together something, it won't tell you if it's right or wrong until you have a set of three. Like once you get three people figured out, it'll say, "Ha, congratulations, you've secured 3 fates," and then it'll go from like your handwritten notes into the journal to like a typed out report, basically saying this person was killed by this other person or something like that. And so the first, like my first playthrough, like basically the way it plays out is like once you've seen all of the scenes, kind of an event triggers, like, hey, like the guy that brought you to the ship is like, hey, the storm's coming, we gotta go. And at that point you can leave and like file your report, or you can go back and start revisiting and try and like piece together stuff. I took the opportunity. I was like, I'm curious. There's also like it says like right up front, there are a couple things that you will not be able to unlock until you've left the boat. And so I was like, okay, so this seems like a game where I'm not supposed to figure it all out the first time out. And it's kind of, there's a little bit of like replayability kind of designed into it. So when I left the first time, I think I only had like 15 of the 60 fates unlocked and uncovered. And so yeah, that first playthrough was like 4 hours. And then really at that point, it's a matter of going in and like re-examining scenes now that you've got, like, because you also, there's also like a Memento kind of style to it, in that you're not seeing things in chronological order. Like the first scene that most people are going to uncover is like the last scene that happened in the timeline of your journal. Because that's the other thing, is your journal is like broken out in chapters, and it'll be like, so like the first scene that you unlock is from chapter 10 titled The End, and there's like 4 other scenes that you can see as a part of that, that will kind of like dole out everybody's fate. But then like the next one you might see when you like start investigating will be like chapter 4, and then like, so something that you uncover at the end, like I think one of the last ones I uncovered was like chapter 3 or something like that. Oh, characters that are introduced and are finally like named in this sequence. Now I can put a name to the picture that I have, and I remember that picture, that character was involved in this murder, 3 chapters ago or something like that. So it's really like at that point, you've now got all the pieces before you. You got to figure out how they link together. And the game tries to help you along the way and say like, it'll like when you first encounter a character, his picture will come up and it's usually pretty blurred. And it'll say like, hey, you don't have enough details. You've not encountered enough to really like piece together who this person is yet. So you kind of have to wait for more information to come out. And then once the game has like given you all of the puzzle pieces or all the scenes you need to really like say, oh, this is the first mate. Then the character's like image will become clear. But even there, you'll get like, there's like a 3-star kind of system above them where it's like, if it's 1 star, you can probably deduce who this person is. If it's 2 stars, it's going to take a little bit more like, back and forth of like looking at different parts of the story and different clues. And then if it's like 3 stars, like, hey, yeah, you can figure this person out, but it's going to be like, extra challenging kind of thing. Or because there are elements where like some of it is just a process of elimination. Like you're not going to be told every bit of the detail in the course of the game. And so some of it is just going to be like, okay, I know it's like one of these 3 people that killed this guy in this way. So let me try with like I know I've already got 2 other answers correct, so I'm just waiting for that third one to lock in these people. So let me take this person and say, okay, like for example, they're like one character will be like, you killed my brother, and so that helps you identify who these two characters are, but you don't know which brother is which. And so it's a matter of just going into the journal and saying, okay, is it Nathan? Nope, nothing happens. Okay, let me check and say it's Samuel with the same last name. And then I get the little message saying, congratulations, you've unlocked 3 more fates or whatever, and it secures them. So now I know, okay, well, Nathan is the other one, so I can go and tie that together. So yeah, just really cool, and like it becomes really satisfying, like when you solve some of these things. I really had a great time with it. So it was a like I pretty much played through it the last couple days. There's also like it has a fun, like it's a really easy platinum, especially if you like don't care and just will like go to a guide and be like, okay, let me like tell me all the answers guide.
Yeah.
But one of the trophies in there that you have to unlock for the platinum is basically like the captain did it or something like that, and it's just a matter of like you have to go through and just like incorrectly assign the captain as blame for everybody, like basically say like the captain murdered everybody on this ship, and you'll unlock that trophy, and when you go back to file your report, you get kind of like a breakdown of like the claims and everything, and so like the one for the captain was like captain, like 57 counts of murder or something like that. Dishonorably discharged or whatever it is. And the little just commentary that it adds in there is fun. Like, cause other characters will be like, such and such happened. And based on your report, like they attempted mutiny. So we're not going to recognize their claim. In fact, we're going to fine their estate. And so, yeah, there's like a fun little like end storytelling bit. But yeah, I had a really good time with it. It was a ton of fun, and I like it does a great job of kind of just doling out information in interesting ways. Where some of these are going to be like really easy to put together, like all the pieces, and then others it's like, oh, that's really clever how they are connecting this character. Or some of the things would be like, you'll be like the main focus of a scene is what like the lights kind of come up on and the little thing, but if you like walk down the corridor and like look around this other corner, you see like motion, you see events being set into motion that will play out in other scenes, and doing that helps you realize what happened to some of those other characters and stuff. So yeah, it's just a really, really cool, interesting approach to a detective mystery type game.
Sure.
It's especially like knowing it's by the same guy who did the Papers, Please game, and knowing that is a very different like game style.
Papers, Please is so good.
But still has like an interesting kind of like puzzle element to it. Like yeah, I think like based on Papers, Please and Return to the Obra Dinn, I like this guy's I don't remember the developer's name, but he's like 2 for 2 really in my eyes probably.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
So yeah, Return to the Obra Dinn, really great standout game. Obviously, like it won a handful of like indie game of the year awards and stuff in back when it originally came out in 2018. And I picked it up, like the PlayStation is doing like an indie sale right now. And I tweeted out the other day of like, here's like 6 games that were on my best of 2020 list, that are available in this sale. And I basically like went through and was like, let me look at a couple other games that like I've been interested in picking up or that I've heard great things about. And Return of the Obra Dinn was one of them. As I'm sitting here, waiting for the next big game to really sit down and play, hopped into this and had a great time with it. So definitely highly recommend Return of the Obra Dinn, especially if you are a fan of puzzle games or like detective mystery kind of solving. There's just a ton of fun with that in this one. So
love that.
Yep. So let's throw it back over to you here, Logan, for kind of your other big topic of the show. One that you've definitely talked about on this show before.
Yeah.
Temptation Island. And you have to like, you always have to remind me, like, what is the premise of this one? Because I feel like this is like the, like reality show premises that have been going back like the last 10, 15 years.
Yeah. So this is the 3rd season of Temptation Island, started 2 weeks ago now. The premise of Temptation Island is that 4 couples go to Temptation Island. I believe it's set in Hawaii. And basically, they're going to essentially tempt themselves to see, if they're with the right person, if they want to test the relationship. And so by doing this, the four guys get sent off to one house, surrounded by 12 women, excuse me, and the four women that they're dating get sent off to another house with 12 men who are all single, and who are looking for a relationship. And so the couples who are now separated, have to navigate the minefield of all the temptation being thrown at them. They go on dates with people that they choose to see, to forge new connections, to all this kind of stuff. Ostensibly because, they want to make sure they're with the right person. They want to make sure that the problems they have, they can overcome and think about a lot, I guess. I made the joke yesterday, because that's when we watched the second episode in our little trash group that we have here over Zoom, of just they took the idea of Jesus wandering the desert for 40 days being tempted by the devil, and they ran with it, man. They ran with it and made it juicy. And that's where we got. It's trashy. It is what spawned my group's kind of trash TV Friday night viewing. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I mean, it's just great. The host is Mark Wahlberg, not that Mark Wahlberg, a different Mark Wahlberg.
That seems like intentionally deceptive.
It's great, and the best part too is
also that seems like against SAG that seems like a violation of SAG-AFTRA or something like that. There's a reason people have stage names.
People change their names.
Or there's a reason people have middle initials in their names and stuff.
Yeah, I think his is technically Mark H. Wahlberg, but people it's Mark Wahlberg.
There you go. Yeah. I remember hearing about that for the first time, or what's cemented in my mind is the one of the showrunners for Futurama is David X. Cohen, and his middle name isn't actually X or whatever. It's just there was already a David Cohen in the Writers Guild, and so he needed to come up with something else, and he was like, well. X is gonna make me stand out more than anything else, and he's a super nerd and stuff like that. So that's what he went with.
But it's great. I mean, it's a ton of fun. It's goofy. It's dumb. It's trashy. One of the things about Temptation Island that made my whole group of friends fall in love with season 1 is the couples you root for and against, right? And season 1 had the sleeper hit of Javen and Shari, who seemed like they were a mess. She just seemed crazy and he seemed just kind of dopey. And then over the course of the season, they end up being the sleeper, holy shit, they're actually an amazing, because the whole point is that once the couples are on the island, they have that first night together and then they don't see each other for an entire month. They don't talk to each other for a month. They're at two separate villas basically. Mm-hmm. But they get shown video clips of what their partner's doing every few days, and they're put together in a way that makes them really damning.
Yeah.
The problem is that
it's almost like the people who work on these shows as editors and producers and directors have no souls and are just the worst of humanity.
It's funny too because the problem is that Javen and Char were just a genuinely good couple, and they actually just loved each other. Because it was the first season, so there had been no template for them to do anything else. They're just we have our problems, but weird enough, they were the couple that proved the rule wrong. We're you're here to grow as people, so you'll be a better couple, and that means just be messy and cheat on people. But they actually use it to grow more as a couple and to learn about themselves more. And they came together and they're super great. And Javen's just this very sweet guy who would he's you have to go on dates, but his dates are always just him having just a friendly interaction with another woman. And there's a clip of Javen just the girl he just kept taking on dates was just a person that he made a friendship with. Mm-hmm. And there's a clip of him, one of the guys is in a hot tub making out with a girl, and then it cuts to Javen in his room folding laundry with his friendly girl, and it's just man, there's such different dynamics, and it cuts to the whole premise of the end of the season is it goes to them on they have this big date, they spend a full 24 hours stuck with this other person as the final date before you meet up at the final bonfire with your partner. And Javen took his friend basically, and they were just And it was just them being like very nice to each other about being like, you're like, I wish like the girl was like, I wish I could have more friends like you. And it's Jake be like, yeah, like it's really nice to have like just a genuine friendship like this. Like I really enjoy it. And then him being like, I can't wait to meet Shari again. Like I love her, and like him just being like, I love my girlfriend so much, and like him just like so happily saying that. And it cuts like every other like couple like banging except for him and Shari, and it's like, yeah, like it's weird. Like they broke the rules. Like they actually just like made it really nice. And then season 2, like they were all trash. Like they were all like none of them were really that great. And so season 3, hopefully we have like one good couple to root for. And then the trash, like it's weird. One of the friends I'm watching with pointed out that like, you know, this is the 3rd season, so like the couples and the producers, obviously, but like the couples in particular have 2 seasons to like watch. And so like one of the guys like let slip in like one of the confessionals or just to like another contestant of being like, yeah, like I don't want her to like see anything that I'm doing bad, right? And like they understand like the game mechanics was now being like not trying to like you don't want to get caught out kind of thing. And so I thought that was interesting as well, like a little bit like Survivor, which I always talk about as is a perfect television show, and how Survivor is really interesting because there are like over 30 seasons of that show, and it's been on for like over 20 years now. That like you've had people who have like grown up watching Survivor and have like learned the different strategies and mechanics versus you watch season 1 of Survivor, which is my favorite season, and it's just them all being like, oh, this is like Swiss Family Robinson Crusoe, or like we're all in it together.
Gilligan's
kind of thing.
Island, yeah,
and we're on it together. And you have like literally just one guy, Rich Hatch, being like, I want to win $1 million. I'm gonna fuck all of you over to get that money. And him like basically like single-handedly inventing the game. And it's like crazy to watch like how hurt those people are every time he like stabs them in the back to win $1 million. It's also incredible TV.
Yeah,
and it's
definitely like one that like just in the what if machine of the universe, it would be fascinating to see what Survivor looked like if what Survivor would look like, 5 years down the line if Richard Hatch had not been in that first season.
Yeah.
Like, and
or if he had gotten stopped, if he had gotten voted up beforehand.
Yeah.
If he hadn't kept switching. That's the thing. Like, the thing about, I literally could do a whole podcast about Survivor, in particular the first season. Like, I think it is like incredible TV. Like, just in like terms of like the psychology behind all of it. But yeah, like, because like the thing about it is that like, so first off, Survivor wouldn't be on the air anymore. If not for like how that season played out, like it wouldn't be on the air still. Because like that's the thing.
I mean, like I definitely think somebody would have figured out like how to game and connive.
Yeah, but
because that's clearly also like the intent behind the challenges and the tribal circle or whatever, the tribal council, and voting people off. Like
I don't think
it's designed for
20 years later. Like I think it would have been like a successful like 6, 7, 8 season maybe run, and then like it would kind of have faded.
Maybe if that first season hadn't been so much like must see, but like I definitely think like somebody would have figured that out and made
eventually
Survivor into what it was. Just whether or not it would have done it while all eyes were still on it probably would have been
because that's the thing. Like people forget now, but like that first season finale of Survivor had like 40 million views, I think something crazy like that, and like it was such a like must see thing. Like I remember like sitting down in my like living room on my floor, like sitting cross-legged watching like the final episode of the season. And like that whole final tribal council is just nuts because it's just people being like, I'm pissed that I got voted off, and then just like, oh, because it wasn't a game like at that point, like it wasn't a thing, and like they're just like genuinely mad, and like you have like Sue giving her like famous like a rat and a snake speech, like Rich is a snake who like just like swallows people up, but like Kelly, you're a rat because you were my friend all the way through. I knew Rich was just a snake who's out to win, but you were supposed to be my friend, and you stabbed me in the back, and like this whole just like, incredible, like the emotions of all of it were so like raw. That and like Rich Hatch, who's like like a 45-year-old like Rhode Island stockbroker who's gay, genuinely forming this like super close relationship with like this like 75-year-old former Navy SEAL and Rudy, and then just having like this genuine bond. It was like super, again, speaking to what we talked about in the last episode, like you would see nothing like that in 2000 when Trevor happened. Like it was like way ahead of its time. And also the fact that like the first winner of the show was gay. Like it was, Survivor is interesting in that regard too, because it is like so progressive in terms of like who wins, just like who kind of is the best at making bonds. But anyway, Temptation Island is not Survivor. It is not as good.
So
It's not as fun, but it is trashy and it is enjoyable.
So what is the game of Temptation Island? Is like does
This is the
does
thing.
one of the couples like win anything at the end?
This has been my one big complaint all the way through. There is no prize. You get nothing if you win. What you get if you win is you now know that your relationship is solid. That's the prize. And like every single time that we set the new season, I'm always like, this is dumb as shit that you get nothing. You don't get like, oh, like even if the prize is just like you win like, a romantic getaway to Bora Bora for a week with you and your partner who have like made it to the end and like stayed together. It's like, nope, it's just, can you be trash or can you be a couple? Pick your choice, basically.
All right.
I do think that's kind of dumb. Again, part of why it's not as good as Survivor, also because one is actually good TV and one is trash. But like, yeah, it's fun.
Okay. All right. That's Temptation Island. There we go.
It's like, to me, it's like, it's the same reason why people watch like The Room and stuff. Like, it's a great show to just like make fun of together with friends.
Yeah, that's fair.
That's like the premise of it.
So like I mentioned, and I had a whole episode a couple weeks ago, I think, dedicated to the first Mass Effect. I have been replaying through the Mass Effect trilogy. Really just because I'm dumb and bored and and I guess wanted to like refamiliarize myself with all this stuff before a new canon playthrough or whatever in the Legendary Edition. But I've been playing through, and so I'm basically in the final mission of Mass Effect 2, and had forgotten I made like some decision. And so, like, when something happened in the final mission, I got mad. I was like, "Oh, damn it! I did the wrong thing." And so now something happened that I didn't want to happen. And I'm like, do I like reload a save from like 5 hours before, or do I just like push forward? And I'm probably at this point just gonna push forward and just be like, whatever, it fucking happened, it happened. But it will definitely be in my mind when I'm playing through. In a couple months of like, don't fuck that up again, Trevor. Like, you know what to do now to not fuck that up. But Mass Effect 2 in particular, as I've been hopping into it, is just a great standout game. There's clearly a reason a whole bunch of people love it and give it all the praise and think it's the best of the trilogy. In particular, like as far as that conversation, like it works incredibly well as like an introduction to the series, because any real key things you needed to know beforehand will get explained in the beginning. It also does probably the very best possible iteration of you became really powered in the first game. We need to kind of like take you back down to basics for game 2. And I won't say how for anybody that doesn't want to be spoiled or anything like that. But like the way they approach that in this one is just one of my favorites in gaming in general. And just the characters that you encounter, be it characters from the first game or characters that are brand new to the series in this game, are just so rich and full of life, and regardless of if you're taking like a Paragon route or a Renegade route, like they have interesting like responses to whichever kind of approach you take, and I really just have a great time with it. In particular, in this one, each character kind of has like their loyalty mission, so basically you have like an introduction mission for each of the characters that kind of like brings them into the fold and brings them into your party, and then you have like their loyalty mission that kind of helps you deepen the relationship with the character. And so often those are just great like self-contained chapters within this larger story that you're telling, and just are really fun and like are so wonderfully focused in a way that does make it like, if Mass Effect 2 is like a season of like Lost or something, it's like, okay, this is the episode of Lost, like Lost had, here's a Locke episode, a Locke centric episode where the flashbacks were all built around Locke's story and stuff like that. You have like great episodes of the Mass Effect 2 storyline that are like, oh, here's the Miranda episode, here's the Jacob episode, here's the the Morden Solus episode and stuff like that. So really really fun. And I'm playing through mostly Renegade, which is not how I typically play these kinds of games. But it's fun just seeing like how much of a dick Shepard can be, and in turn how much a dick like some of your other like characters can be, and will respond. Like some of them will be like whoa, you took it way too far, and then others will be like, damn right. And it's fun seeing how your different like party members will respond to a lot of that stuff. So yeah, Mass Effect 2, I'm having a really good time just kind of like continuing that playthrough, and especially I talk about this be it in another podcast I've recorded for somebody else that'll come out sometime in the next few months. But I think I also touched on this a little bit in the Mass Effect 1 episode. But just the really cool way that like your choices from the first game do carry over into the second game and will carry over into the third game, in big and small ways. Like obviously there are some like universe altering choices that kind of are made in each game, but even like, oh, you helped this person out in the first game, and so now when you encounter that character again in the second game, they interact with you in a different way than they would if you didn't help them at all, or if you helped, or if you like deliberately spurn them or something like that. And so it's just like even the the smallest of side characters will come back into play throughout the series in cool and interesting ways. In some cases, it's like, oh, you get like a message, a readable message at your terminal or something that's just like, hey, I heard you're out saving the world kind of thing. I just wanted to thank you again for, how you helped me back on such and such a planet from the first game. It's like, oh, cool. That's a message I wouldn't have gotten if I hadn't done that, the first way. So like, I really wish another studio would come out and make this big committed idea of like, we're going to tell this big story across multiple games and do this, because I feel like obviously it's one of the weaknesses of modern day BioWare, is that they don't have that kind of storytelling. Mass Effect Andromeda could have set up for like future storytelling opportunities, but obviously it crashed and burned, and so we didn't get to see that continue on in the Mass Effect universe. And yeah, I wish there were other series that kind of like rewarded, like me doing 100%. Like it would, how cool would it be if like in this, in like the Assassin's Creed Origins, Odyssey, and Valhalla trilogy of like, if you did things in Origins that somehow affected what your assassin in Odyssey or in Valhalla, does, if they affected, because, those games all have like decisions you can make, but in the grand scheme of like the overarching story of these games, they don't do anything. And so, yeah, it's one of those things that like replaying the Mass Effect games, that's at the forefront of my mind, is like, I wish more games did that, where like a decision I made in a past game, like Life is Strange, even as an example, like, your big choice from Life is Strange 1 can be imported in, or you can basically say what you did in that, and it will, a scene or two will play out differently in Life is Strange 2. But I just wish, a studio were doing it on the scale that they did with the Mass Effect series, because I think that was something really special, and why that series, holds such a special place in so many people's hearts. So yeah. That's my Mass Effect 2 update and thoughts. Any questions or comments from you, Logan?
Just real quick, because I had to know. 51.7 million people watched the finale of Survivor Season 1. Yeah. And that was the average, was 51.7. And Nielsen reported that up to 125 million people watched at least part of the finale. That's what I was talking about. It's a big deal. Yeah. In terms of Mass Effect, no, I mean, I've talked before about like, if there was any Mass Effect game that I'd most be like, I would like to play that as a standalone game, it would be Mass Effect 2. That would be the one, right? Because Mass Effect 1's like combat, I think kind of concerns me at times when I kind of hear stuff about that. And also just because, the middle part of a trilogy is usually really cool and really good. And like, I'd be very, and also Martin Sheen is in this one, and so yeah, I mean, we will see what happens when the Legendary Collection comes out. But at the very least, if I can't, if I try to do one or whatever and I don't like it, I'll at least, potentially try to get through Mass Effect 2 and see how I feel about that game, and then go from there.
Yeah, and that's like
I'm excited.
I mean, I often talk about like Mass Effect 2 was the first game I played in the series, and in particular, something that they gave you with the original Mass Effect 2 and will be giving you people again in the Legendary Collection is this like comic that you could kind of like this digital comic basically that like it was like a 15-minute like choose your own kind of narrative in comic form for that basically ran you through all the big choices of the first game that would then kind of carry over into your playthrough of Mass Effect 2. So even if you skip the first game entirely, you could probably still at least do that comic and go in with like some of the big choices set for you. But yeah, like like going back, like the combat of the first game isn't too egregious. I mean, it's like the combat across all three is very Gears of War like.
Not nominated
in that, it's cover-based third-person shooter. You can do a little bit of interesting stuff with like tactics, where you can basically like, direct your team to like flank people by using like the directional pad or something like that. I think they're going to streamline, in particular, the first game's combat to make it more in line with the combat in 2 and 3, which it's mostly simplified in that. It takes out like RPG elements. Like in the first game, there were like playing through the first game, there were like 10 to 12 things that I could assign like points to that would like improve, how effective my pistol shot is versus my sniper rifle shot versus my abilities or whatever. And the later games very much simplify that, and they're like, we're like, you don't have to worry about like your gun abilities based on the type of character you have. That's what dictates what kinds of guns you can use. And so it's more like, here's how oh, you want to pour points into your powers, okay, your power will like increase each time at that point. So I think that'll all be, I mean, again, basic third-person cover shooter, so you can get behind that or not.
Sure.
And you have like powers that you can kind of unleash, and like you can change, like depending on who. Like I've been playing as a soldier, which means I don't have as many powers, but I have kind of a full suite of ammo modifiers, so I can turn my bullets into fire bullets, which are great great at taking out like armor, or I can turn them into disruptor bullets, which are great at taking down shields or something like that. And you can basically switch those on a dime. So yeah, it's like the combat also, again, as you touched on, not what the series is known for, but it's fine. It's fine combat. But yeah, the real heart of the series is the characters and the storytelling across the trilogy. So looking forward to finishing up my Mass Effect 2 and then diving into Mass Effect 3. My first time like revisiting Mass Effect 3 probably since it came out. So yeah, looking forward to having a good time with that. Yeah. Did you have anything else you wanted to bring to the table, or do we want to just dive into my last couple things here?
The only thing I just wanted to briefly touch on is that I've started to rewatch Psych, which again is just is one of my favorite shows of all time. Would probably be on my top 4 or 5 list. It's fantastic. We're still very early in it. We're like right around halfway through season 1. We just started it this week, but it's great. I think there was just something so charming and such just like you just feel warm watching Psych. At least I do, right? I think James Roday and Dule Hill have phenomenal chemistry, like shockingly good chemistry. Yeah. Like the only real on-screen pair I can think of that is kind of an analog to them is Zach Braff and
I was gonna say
Don
JD and Turk.
Yeah. Their chemistry is so good. I think that, I mean, again, admittedly, me and Trevor are much noted Do the Hill fans, as evidence from our Western podcast where we talked about him frequently. He's great. I mean, the dude was on TV like uninterrupted for almost 20 years for a reason. He's just very good at what he does. He's very talented. And I think James Rodriguez, is similarly brilliant as Sean. Corbin Burns, I mean, just like the cast is stacked. It's really fun to see it from the very beginning, and as they kind of like find their footing, right? Like the pilot, Jules is not in because it's Lasseter's like partner who he's like romantically involved with, and then for whatever reason she's out of the pilot after that episode, and they bring in Jules, and she got transferred because of the romantic relationship. And yeah, it's a ton of fun. Sean, his dad's relationship is much more kind of like begrudge and antagonistic a little bit at times in season 1, and they kind of soften that as the show goes on. And it's really neat to see it from the very beginning, right? Because I always talk about how Psych was the first show that I've ever watched from beginning to end. I'd been there for the entire journey. But season 1 is one of the seasons I watch less generally. It's also just like on reruns less. And so it is kind of neat to see it again. And that first 4 or 5 season run of Psych, starting here and then again going obviously until about like 4 or 5, is just like so good. And like seasons 2, 3, and 4 in particular are like almost a perfect, like it's like very rarely like not a great episode in that midst in those kind of 3 seasons. And so we're building towards that. It's exciting.
Remind me, have you watched the movies?
I have not. So that is the thing. We're eventually going to build our way through the 8 seasons and go into the movies. I've never seen the movies, which obviously that's going to be a little bit down the line, but I'm very excited for that. I'm excited to see how I feel about the later seasons as well, which I still like, but I think they're just not as good. I think any kind of Psycho fan would agree. But yeah, I mean, I love Psych. One of my proudest accomplishments is indoctrinating my entire family into being Psych fans, and so I'm excited to extend that reach even further.
Yeah, I'm realizing we've probably talked about this a little bit here and there, but I have fond memories of watching Psych, but at some point I just stopped, and like I don't know quite when that was, but looking up IMDb and seeing like, oh, it ran from 2006 to 2014. I mean, it probably, like, my time with it was probably really those first couple seasons when I was still in college and still had like, you know, a cable, like had cable TV. Because once that moved to like a digital, or like once I moved and started cutting the cable and you know, went to digital stuff, I drastically cut down on watching, especially like the USA and TNT kinds of shows.
USA is
like
so good.
Your Psych, your Burn Notice, all that kind of stuff that like I watched a ton of at the time, and then just have not gone back to. I think
this is the thing, like the late 2000s, early 2010s, like my family used to joke, like I like exclusively watched USA. Like there was like a time where like it was like Monk, which again is one of my favorite shows of all time. I love Monk. Psych was on, Burn Notice, like Royal Pains. I never really liked White Collar, but some people did. The show with Mary McCormick in it, like it was like they were
the
just
U.S. Marshal one,
knocking it. Yeah, they were just like knocking it out of the park for me. And it was just like, man, this is everything that I was watching, and it's around probably like 2011, 2012. Somewhere in that range where like I started to like drop off as like the shows either went on too long or like the new ones they were having to replace the old ones I didn't like as much, right? And like Monk had ended by that point for a couple of years, and Psych was in like it's like winding down stretch, and Burn Notice later seasons were nonsense, like lost conspiracy theory garbage. But there was that window for me, like 2000 and like 6 to like 2010. Like 2011, where like that was like the golden age of USA Network as far as I was concerned, and Psych was absolutely a key to that.
Yeah, in that, so a couple things. This week's That D Plus show, this last week's That D Plus show I did was on Tall Tale, and in finding or in looking at the research on that, the guy who directed Tall Tale, had also directed like National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation before that.
Oh, wow, okay.
And something else that had jumped out at me, but after after Tall Tale, and later in his career, he very much kind of like moved to television, including he had done some episodes of Leverage, he had done a lot of Burn Notice, and he had done a lot of Chuck. So like I was like, oh, I've probably seen like a ton of this guy's work because of this. And I include Leverage. I looked behind me because I was like, I feel like I may have like bought Psych on DVD at some point.
I absolutely
because that's
have
what
Psych
like
on
all
DVD.
of that's what all of these are, is like all of my TV show DVDs, and then like all of the movie ones are over here. I do not have Psych on DVD, and it's probably like I probably looked into it multiple times, like Psych and Monk, of like,
Monk
let
is
me
so
let me pick those up on DVD, and I'll do I'll rewatch them. Because that was like, you know, a pocket of time before streaming really took off, where that's how I would do that. And I feel like I remember like every time I looked up Psych, like they were always just like super overpriced or something like that, and I could never find them like at a good rate. And so yeah, I've not ever circled back to check them out now that they're probably on digital stream, because they're probably on they're probably all on Peacock right now or something.
No, actually, so we're watching them on Amazon Prime.
Oh, okay. It's weird because I think like the movie was like specifically made for Peacock, so
Yeah.
I wonder if
But even the
I wonder
movies
if they're
are
on
on
both
Amazon
places
Prime.
or something.
I mean,
Okay.
I think there are 2 movies, but at least the first one is on Amazon Prime as well.
Okay. Well, cool. I'm glad you're enjoying your time with Psych. It's definitely one.
Speaking
that,
of movies, Trevor, what have you been watching?
speaking of movies, yeah, I'll lump all these three together because basically like one inspired, or like I watched one and then the other two were suggested off of it. So I watched The Mummy a
Great
few
movie.
weeks back when
movie.
it came to HBO Max, and I was like, I have not watched The Mummy in so long. Let me circle back
So
to that. And yeah, like everybody is firing on all cylinders on that one, and it does like it. I mean, it is easily like a significantly better Indiana Jones movie than Crystal Skull ended up being. So, but
yeah.
it
I'll agree with
like
that.
it just like it hits that pulp, you know, action and comedy so well. Like that is Brendan Fraser at the height of his powers, basically.
Yes.
And like rewatching it, I was like, why? Like, what happened to Brendan Fraser in the industry that
Yeah.
like took him out? Like, it's unfortunate that he's become like a laughing stock and meme or
Well, it's
whatever.
really.
from,
Have you?
from
Do you
his
not
like?
know what happened?
I mean, I don't know.
No, okay.
I've
Well,
heard things here. So I mean, tell me before we dive into it.
It's like really. So like, it's actually. He. I don't want to say. It was Harvey Weinstein like specific, but it was like some like male producer like sexually like harassed him kind of thing and made advances basically, and then there's like a whole I can't remember the name, but like this came out like a year or so ago.
It looks well, the first thing that comes up when I Google it is Danny Boyle.
Oh, yeah, maybe it was Danny Boyle. I didn't know that. But I know that like some male
Because
producer.
it's like a GQ article of like what happened to
Yeah.
Brendan Fraser. So I'm scrolling through this to see if I can. But so basically like somebody kind of like
Alleged he was sexually
blacklist
assaulted
him.
by Philip Burke, the president
Okay.
of the Hollywood Foreign Press Association, at a luncheon in the summer of 2003. The incident, his subsequent divorce, the death of his mother, launched Fraser into a depression that, combined with health issues and a backlash within the industry over speaking out against Burke, caused the decline of his career.
Yeah, that is unfortunate.
Yeah, that's what happened to him. And like 2003 is like pretty much right after like The Mummy 2, basically. Like around that time, like the Looney Tunes movie that he was in as well, and like yeah, he was like right there. And then the president of the Hollywood Foreign Press Association is a pretty important person.
Basically like blacklisted him. So yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, fuck Hollywood sometimes.
Yeah.
I hope he like has a great renaissance because like
Yeah.
like
He's been in
like,
a few good things in the last few years that I've seen him in.
Yeah, like honestly, like just seeing like and rewatching The Mummy is just like so much fun. And like one weird little discovery that I saw watching it in my like IMDbing everything because of that D Plus show. The person who plays Anck-su-namun was also. Well, I'm gonna forget her character's name. Marta. She was Marta in Arrested Development. The house like keeper that Michael gets involved with for a few episodes or something like that. I was like, oh, like
That's a weird
did not piece those
connection,
things
yeah.
together. But yeah, that was like it's such a fun movie, and there's just
Yeah.
such a fun energy to it. And like I'd forgotten how much of that really came back to me.
It's incredible. Yeah. It is such a genuinely great movie.
On the flip side, one of the, like when I finished it, it was like, here are other suggestions based on this, and the two Austin Powers movies came up, and I was like, I started watching Spy Who Shagged Me first, and I got into it and like saw Heather Graham or something in the credits. I was like, oh, this is the wrong one. I jumped into the wrong one. Let me go watch the first one first. And so watched International Man of Mystery, and like. I think I talked about this with you
I've
before
shared
we
this
started.
information with everyone that you've told since you told me about this. It blows my mind still.
So yeah, we talked
Yeah.
about this a little bit before we recorded that news you care about last week. But yeah, the fact that what you're talking about is that Mini Me is not in the first movie.
Yep. Blows my mind.
And did not come around until the second movie, which is like he is so ingrained with that franchise that you think he was there all along. But no, it's like it is such a weird. I mean, it is the epitome of a product of its time kind of movie, and like it holds up more or less like fine. A lot of the humor is way more juvenile than like anything I would be interested in really watching today. But I did not like realize or fathom how quotable this movie was, and how like how ingrained in pop culture so many elements of the movie became from that character. And there was a similar moment in there where like I was watching, and Elizabeth Hurley is great in the first one, and then just immediately gets killed off in the second movie, and it's like, did something happen to her in her career, kind of thing? Because like even that, like, and tying it into the Brendan Fraser stuff, like I remember really enjoying her in like Bedazzled too.
Yeah, that's another deep cut.
And like then she just kind of like fell off the map for like a long time after that. And like it seems like in her case it was more she became like a victim of just the Hollywood, like she was the hot thing in Hollywood, and then aged out of a couple things,
The
and
range,
they
yeah.
stopped wanting to cast her in things. But like yeah, like there were elements of the Austin Power things where I was like, okay, some of this is still like really clever and really funny and stuff, but then there was a lot of it where it's just like, oh my god, this joke is just going on way too long and is not nearly worth it. I imagine I would probably feel similarly if I sat down and rewatched like Happy Gilmore and Billy Madison nowadays, because it's very much like that 90s SNL type of humor.
I think also for that, like branch into that territory, like I think you would feel that way about Billy Madison. Happy Gilmore is pretty clever. It's like definitely the most like adult of like the 90s Adam Sandler movies, I would say. It's like an actual like story behind it. Unlike Little Nicky or Billy Madison or kind of things that are just like skits stitched together.
Yeah.
I would love, like, I mean, I believe he did, but like, I would love for like John and Comedy Rewind, like the 8-Bit boys over there in Australia, to like know what their thoughts are whenever he rewatched it.
There also there's an alarming amount of like you can see where across both movies you can see where Mike Myers is basically planting the seeds for what would become the Love Guru, and it's like you completely missed the mark on that.
Yeah, it's Mike. So I love Mike Myers. Like it's such an interesting thing. Like Mike Myers, I feel like now is like maybe the best comparison is like Eddie Murphy a little bit in terms of just like when they were at their best in like the 80s and 90s respectively, like they were good. Like they were like they were like untouchable. Like a Mike Myers movie that like not a lot of people know about.
I also appreciate the comparison in that like they're both both performers that are like well known for like playing multiple characters in the same movie.
Yeah, that's a good point too. And they're also starred in Shrek together too, I guess. That was like the one, yeah. But
that's the other thing is like when you get to Fat Bastard in the second movie, it's like, okay, yep, he's just auditioning for Shrek really in this one.
It's for me like because one of my favorite Mike Myers movies that like I feel like no one knows about and it always breaks my heart is I Married an Axe Murderer, which is one of my.
I somehow I knew that was the one you were gonna say, but I don't think of that as like one that like nobody knows about. I think it's just like one that like wasn't. as ingrained in his like sketch comedy background.
It's one of my favorite Mike Myers movies. The movie is so funny. And like,
I remember watching it like a lot on like Comedy Central growing up because it would be that cut. It was never one that I like
10:30 at night.
Yeah, it was never one I really got into or anything like that. Again, because like I preferred, especially then, his more sketch based stuff. But it's probably one I would. That's probably like the one I would appreciate the most if I watched it today.
I bet. Because I didn't watch until I was probably like 13, like 12 or 13, watching late night Comedy Central stuff. Yeah, I mean Mike Myers is great. The second Austin Powers is better than the first one, I would say. And I think the Elizabeth Hurley thing too, like I'm also curious about that, but like I wonder how much of that too is also a product of they didn't plan for a sequel. Like there was never like the intention to have a sequel. It was going to be like a one-off, and it was way more successful than they thought. And they're like,
we need to make Austin single again. So she was a fembot all along.
Sorry about this one, Elizabeth. So I wonder how
just
much
ignore the fact that she had, like a mother, like Mrs. Kensington. Like, nope, she was a fembot all along. There was a like probably my favorite gag in the second movie is like a straight to the camera take where they're talking about like sending Austin back to the 60s and basically like talking about how like, wait, isn't that going to cause a time disruption and blah blah blah. And Basil's like, I suggest you not worry about it, Austin. And then he turns to the cameras like, I suggest you not worry about it either. Just talking to the audience. Just enjoy the ride kind of thing.
Yeah.
And certainly that's like where the most fun is to be had. But there's definitely a lot of stuff in there where it's just like I mean the like just the two of us like sequence in there in Spy Who Shagged Me and stuff. Like also on the replacing Elizabeth Hurley, like they get a pass basically because like we're doing send up of Bond and every Bond had a different Bond woman, so they can so it can be Heather Graham in this one, and then Beyonce in the third one, which I don't think Bowfinger or not going like Bowfinger's that was the Eddie Murphy movie that came out around that time. Gold Member. I don't think is on HBO Max.
It's also not.
I didn't
good.
see it.
That, like even at the time that was I think for me the two kind of final Austin Powers thoughts I have, and they're really both about the second movie, are just like two of my favorite scenes, which is after Elizabeth Hurley's Fembot gets like destroyed, and it's him like naked, like going to the hotel with like the music in the background is like a great like physical comedy thing, I think. And like innuendo heavy thing. And then the other one is one that we talked about. I don't even know if it was on a podcast or just like off air, which is Mike Myers, Mike Myers, Heather Graham, and Will Ferrell's I Can't Get Asked the Question More Than 3 Times skit is still really fun. I just YouTubed that skit like 2 weeks ago before you'd even watched it, and it's still so funny. It still holds up so well to me.
Yeah. And that we talked. That was another thing we talked about before recording That News You Care About this last week. Just like the dearth of talent that's like in this movie before like any like they broke out like Will Ferrell and stuff like that. Is certainly something to be attested. Whereas like on the flip side, in looking at the IMDb trivia for Spy Who Shagged Me, like one of the things in there that's talking is like Heather Graham was like basically a day away from deciding to go do porn when she got the call to come and do Spy Who Shagged Me. Like she was basically ready to give up on like a more legitimate acting career. And so one of the things she did when the movie came out was she went and like bought the porn that she turned down. Like she went and just found it and bought it to as like a things get better kind of story. It's like
reminder. That's
an interesting story, especially because like I don't know in the timeline of like where this falls with Boogie Nights or whatever, but I feel like she had a great moment there, and I feel like this wasn't like the end of that moment, was it? But maybe it was the beginning. I don't know.
I feel like she was definitely in Austin Powers after Boogie Nights, because Boogie Nights is like 95 or 96, I thought, right? Like I feel like it wasn't.
Boogie Nights was 97, so this was Austin Powers, Spy Who Shagged Me was 99. So yeah, I guess it was afterwards. So maybe
obviously we don't know when they got filmed. They could have been filmed in a weird or
True.
But yeah.
So
Movies
that's
are
those are my thoughts on
Mummy's great.
some of those
Everyone watch The
weird-
Mummy. Stop what you're doing. It's such a good movie.
weird 90s movies.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it, I think I also mentioned this before when we were talking about it the other day. It's so surreal to realize that like how old these movies are, like compared to just like, because again they were obviously such staples of like my childhood or whatever, and then realizing I'm it's 20, 30 years later now or whatever.
Yeah.
So what Austin Powers was made in 97, and Austin was from 67, so it was very much a like 30-year kind of difference, kind of commentary. And so yeah, if you were to make these movies now, it would be going back to like basically 91, and you'd be making fun of like Pierce Brosnan Bond era Bond instead of like Sean Connery era Bond and Roger Moore and stuff like that. So yeah, be weird stuff, like, and we're not that far removed from like making a parody about the Bourne movies or something like that, or Daniel Craig era Bond. So yeah. Crazy stuff. But I think that is going to do it for this week's episode of That Nerdy Site Show. So thank you, Logan, for joining me to sit down and talk about some of this fun stuff. Let's go around the table with any plugs we have. You can follow Logan at Lefty Logie. What do you want to give a shout out to, Logan?
I will give a shout out to the YouTube channel for That Nerdy Site in general. It's real good. Everyone should go check it out. There's lots of good Let's Plays up there, retro gaming things. Trevor made a whole Let's Play channel playlist. You can go check out, look at it. And it's real neat. So I'll go check that into my shout out bucket.
Cool. You can follow me at Trevor J. Starkey, and I will. We're doing basically reverse shout outs from what we did on the episode before this, because I'm going to shout out. Logan has been teasing a piece that should theoretically go live the same day as this, and now it's going to be added pressure for him to actually put the finishing touches on it. But it's basically a best game of the year for the last 10 years kind of re-examination / look back. That he's been working on for some time.
It's a lot of fun, yeah.
So yeah, check that out, hopefully, on That Nerdy Site as you are listening to this. If not, it should be there soon. And if it's not there, tweet at Logan at Lefty Logie and give him crap and say, hey, Logan, where's your piece? What the hell?
It'll be there on Monday.
So yeah, you can follow all of us over at That Nerdy Site and check out thatnerdysite.com for all of the latest from us. If you liked what you heard, please rate, review, like, subscribe, maybe even consider supporting us on Patreon, where you'll get early access to episodes like the one we recorded right before this, where we talk about some of the games that really benefited from a second playthrough from us. Maybe that's what I'll name that one. Every patron gets early access to monthly bonus episodes like that a month before they go live to the rest of the public. So yeah, as always, thank you for listening. Stay nerdy and be good to each other.